Everybody?
Multiple combinations of the same thing.
They do that.
Tonight's kind of a strange night. It's like I feel like I'm running a holiday schedule because I've never seen so many things crammed into one night in my life. Other than on the holidays where you're running against Christmas parties and everything else. And tonight's one of those nights for us. That's okay. I love who we have. People are still arriving. I'm glad Bryce made it with his lovely wife. I've known Bryce for quite a few years. He's one of the few faces I recognize when I look around because he's been with me for years. For those who don't know, my name is Terrence Boggs. Our pachyderm's been running. This is actually our third meeting. We're actually growing. Tonight's hard to tell. Usually we have even more people, but like I said, tonight's been one of the strangest nights I've ever seen. But that's okay. That's what they say. There's a verse that says, not despising small beginnings. And I really love the way that it's been a blessing to watch this grow. A good senator offered to come, and I really appreciate that. That's going to be one of my highlights of the year, believe it or not, and I'm not exaggerating. Why don't we go ahead and stand and do the pledge? American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to you, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. So thank you very much. Bryce, you were going to do the, you're supposed to do the pledge. You do go ahead and do the invocation.
Okay, excellent. Would you bow with me, please? Father, we want to thank you very much for allowing us here tonight to have the opportunity to hear from our senator, hear his ideas and how he can help rearrange things to make things more convenient for us, to make our lives better, to make things more prosperous, and things simpler. Father, we ask your blessing on him and on us, all those present. Please see us all home safely when this is over, Father. A little bit of inclement weather tonight. We thank you for everything. Amen.
Amen.
Let me go ahead and recognize those people who are here. We have Jim Spangler. He's running for position 2 on the water board. Where are you, sir?
Here.
Glad to. Go ahead and stand up if you want to. Everybody have a look at you.
I'm not hard to see.
That's funny. My wife says the same thing and does like this.
Yeah. Well, she tells me I've got the furniture disease. My chest is fell into my drawers.
Mr. Hardman's here for position 5.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
One of the things we considered doing was actually bringing in all the water board people. Since we're a new organization, we couldn't swing that fast enough. But one of our goals is to host forums like that where we can bring in, because this is going to be a very, very important election. We have Dr. Walter Wilkerson. He's actually chairman of the Republican Party and has been very, very faithful to support all the Republican groups. And also Kendall Toker, I believe it is, representative for Kevin Brady. Lately, I've seen Senator. I actually seen him 3 times last week. I'm expecting a Christmas card from him this year. He and I literally passed each other 3 days in a row, so I thought that was interesting. Why don't you, tonight's speaker, let me say for a second, for those of you who are new, one of our goals, we had a pachyderm 23 years ago, and it closed for various assorted reasons. The pachyderm's goal, actually, we're going to address that next month. We're bringing in the national director for it. But our goal is actually to do forums and to bring in speakers, address issues that are pertinent to the area. We have a fantastic board. And like I said, next month we're going to do that. We're also going to install new members next month and hand out the pins. And we're ordering name tags. We're going full steam. So I really look forward to a time where I can have a pachyderm literally in the Woodlands, here, and in Montgomery. And I think we could easily do that. And that's my vision for what I'd like to see happen. It's grown in the past. I think it'll grow. And we feel a unique niche in the fact that we do allow husbands to be active, full members. This gentleman who's introducing, a good senator, runs the Chamber of Commerce, and he's one of our male people that's on our board and works with us. And half our membership is, half our board is women, the other half are men. And we're probably about the only Republican organization currently in Montgomery County that lets men have an active part in running everything, as well as with women. So I'm balanced in my marriage and on my board, so it works out real well.
You're trying to give us a false sense of security?
That makes us a little bit unique. We'll just go ahead and introduce our speaker tonight, and we'll get going.
I'm glad to see you guys here running for the Lone Star Groundwater Board, and that's one of the things that I think each should be really proud of, is making those elections possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for your leadership.
We're very excited to have Brandon. Back in 2014, Brandon was elected to serve as our legislator to the Texas Capitol. Since being sworn in, he's fiercely represented the interest of the district that spans not only Montgomery County, but Harris, Chambers, Jefferson, and Galveston counties. As a senator, Brandon's built a solid reputation, established over 4 terms in the House. He was known as one of the most conservative, hardworking, and effective legislators in the Texas Capitol, representing the interest of House District 16, which, as most of you know, is Will Metcalf's district now. I was at his fundraiser earlier tonight. But his passion for states' rights, guaranteed under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, earned him chairmanship of the House Federalism Committees, where he monitored the state's relationship with the federal government and protected Texas constitutional rights. Like myself, Brandon's an 8th generation Montgomery County resident where he resides with his family. He did graduate from the wrong university, that being the one in Austin. But he did earn his JD from Oklahoma City University School of Law. He currently serves as Executive Vice President and General Counsel for the Woodlands-based real estate development firm, the Signorelli Company. And he does manage to spend some time ranching just north of here in Madison County. He enjoys Texas history, sports, hunting, and fishing. And without further ado, he's going to tell you more about what he's doing in the Texas Senate for us.
Thank you. Okay, how's everybody? Good? Good. It's good to be with you. So I came over from an event in Kingwood for a judicial candidate, and as everyone knows, you know, we're working hard to turn back whatever this sentiment is to establish a blue wave in Texas, and a big part of that is to protect down ballot and you know, the judges that we need to keep in place in Harris County. And so that event was in Kingwood, and I left there at 6 and got here at 6:45, and I'm late, but I was flying, I promise you, at ground level. And so that's the time and the season that is upon us. By the way, who all likes the fall weather? Yeah, right?
Did you bring that?
I think, I wish I could say, but the good Lord above gave us some cooler weather and maybe ended 90-degree weather for the year.
Thank you.
And that gives us some relief. And of course, we've got a lot of moisture and rainfall on us, and it's good for the landscape, but some of us have had our fill, right? Seems like in Texas we're either in a flood or a drought, but not much in between, which is a great segue for talking about some of the groundwater issues coming up. So talking about down ballot and just helping your friends and neighbors be active and involved and informed and knowing how important the issues are upon us for long-term sustainable water supply and leadership on the groundwater district. Representative Metcalf and I worked on changing, along with the rest of the Montgomery County delegation, changing the current governance structure of the Lone Star Groundwater District this last session from appointed to elected, so the people will have not only more transparency, but a greater say in the representation on that board. When that board was established, David Kleiman and I both served on that board for about 4 years, among others that served in those seats. And it was interesting. I think the voters confirmed the groundwater district at the polls, mainly to play defense, but not really wanting another level of government or establishing any sort of governance structure where we could possibly lose property rights. But the choices were to be governed out of Austin, and nobody here wants that. And we were already 2 seats out of 30 on the Harris-Galveston Area Council for transportation and mobility and other growth issues, and so we're voiceless in many respects on that board. And so there were some not so great choices, but with the groundwater district established and mandates out of Austin requiring desired future conditions and certain planning to be put in place for each part of the state, a lot of groundwater districts were formed, and and now we have one. So having the people decide on the representation is very important. I want to thank those of you that have offered to serve, and it's just very important because if our water planning isn't right, our economy and all the reasons why people want to live in this great area, you know, suffer. And we have to make sure that we make decisions based on science, not on politics, and that it's a hot rock. So I really appreciate and want to commend you for stepping up for it, because as many have said in the past, that, you know, whiskey's for drinking, I guess. I'm not much of a drinker, but water's for fighting. And many people told me, if you want to run for state representative in the future, don't even think about being on the groundwater district back then in '02. But I believe that if people see that you stand for something and you have the backbone and the fortitude to make decisions on behalf of others, that you know, no matter what you plan to do, it may not be anything else past that, that's enough. And some ask me how I got involved in state politics. I'll tell them because you know, I wasn't tough enough for school board, and the water issues were hard in and of themselves. So the state legislature is tough. That arena is very difficult. But these local decisions are every bit as much.
Sir,
so, yes.
Could you do us a favor? Because I get this question all the time.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the San Jacinto River Authority and the Lone Star Groundwater District?
Yeah, the difference between the San Jacinto River Authority and the Lone Star Groundwater District is management of surface water for the River Authority and the river basin that its jurisdiction overlays, and the Groundwater District is responsible for groundwater and our aquifers and the management of the water supply as the growth collides with these areas, and deciding on the policies and the positions that have to be taken to fit together in this great big puzzle piece we call Texas. You know, how we weigh in on groundwater resources and what, if anything, needs to be changed, as many ask for their particular straw to be placed in those aquifers to take water and put it to beneficial use. So the river authorities for surface water and the groundwater districts for groundwater supply and management. And so these changes that are in place will remove the river authority and their vote from the groundwater district. Yes, and that is the original structure based on the original bill that was passed in the legislature, to place both in the room, I'm told, under the pretext of allowing them to talk together and collaborate and communicate, as planning for aquifer use sometimes affects surface water planning. And we saw later on a management plan that did bind both of them together, that just happened to be a 40-year plan that cost $2 billion. And it rolls off the tongue real easy, right? No state, no federal money. Wow, really? $2 billion on that end. It relies on pumpage fees, and that in and of itself means local folks pay for it. So one thing that I put in place in the groundwater district rules to start with was an exemption for mom and pop wells and for anyone that pumps less than 25,000 gallons a day, or almost 10 million gallons a year. Many of you may not know there's 13 small cities in Montgomery County: Stagecoach, Splendora, Cut and Shoot, where I'm from, on and on. And a couple of those small cities don't even pump that now. So those exemptions are healthy. Maybe they need to increase, who knows? But we don't have a lot of data in Montgomery County on our aquifers. Even in recent years, we thought the Catahoula aquifer was brine and was not usable. When we drilled, based on some of the planning that's taken place just for experimental purposes, we found that Mid and North County, the water's clean, but comes out of the ground at 135 degrees and has to be cooled. And then we found what we thought was the entirety of the Catahoula in this area, that South Montgomery County, it was brine and not of a quality that was potable. You know? So that's again through the USGS geological information and what the federal government has and what Harris Galveston Subsidence District offers. we had to extrapolate a lot of that information and guess. Well, when you're telling people no on a property right in a guessing game, those are fighting words, you know. And one thing we changed in the legislature after the Lone Star District was formed was we voted in committee on a split vote, and it came down to a swing vote to establish groundwater as a property right, a vested right. Because before that, it was only what you went after and actually gained control of and put to beneficial use that you could claim was a vested right, a property right. And we changed the law on that because the Texas Supreme Court said several times, we have to keep deciding against the property owner until the legislature acts. So we did, and it's still with those decisions and the advice from the Supreme Court to us, it came down to a split vote in committee, which I was on in the House at that time in '09. So these issues really weigh heavily with special interests, with big law firms, with advisory groups and consultants that make a lot of money. And as is the case in the name of the game, a lot of times, as you all know, when government collides with business and those that converge upon the capital that are paid to do so, have a lot of good reasoning why policy needs to be policy. But you have to listen to those back home that sent you there and keep the noise at bay. And we all know, you know, what that means as we hear it on Fox and all the other channels every day. It's a lot of noise, right? So sometimes I have to turn that off and just read because it stresses me out less to read it. And I'm saying that is a good thing because hearing it all day long in the background, sometimes when I turn it off and try to go to sleep, I still hear it in between my ears, so I need a break from it. But I'm pleased to be with you. I think it's wonderful that with the effort to establish the group, Dr. Waller, you've seen a lot of groups in their origin and in their establishment as new groups and then grow over the years. We all have seen new startups, and then it's amazing how different rooms are set aside because of the growth and how fast it happens. But men and women at the table are a good thing. I think that's always positive, and so congratulations on the effort. I appreciate being a part of one of the inaugural meetings. So Senator Cruz has been in town a lot, right? We've seen the rallies at the Lone Star Convention Center. We helped organize a 48-hour turnaround event at Ransom's Restaurant in Montgomery on Saturday where 700 showed up. And on. He was in El Paso that same night in Francis O'Rourke's backyard. I use his real name. So I think several thousand showed up at that event. And so there we have again the best that $140 million can buy you in the state of Texas. And where that money is coming from is very interesting. The country and California and New York especially. So we'll see what money from elsewhere buys, and can that promote and gain favor from Texans that believe in the Second Amendment, that believe in states' rights and the 10th Amendment and letting Texas run Texas. And you know, the candidate that's pro-life, pro-gun, pro-family, pro-business, pro-America, pro-Texas, pro-tax relief for Harvey victims, pro-border security, and pro-Constitution, and the candidate that's not. And so can you buy favor from Texans if you don't stand for what we stand for? I guess we'll find out. Where I just came from in Kingwood, Texas, which is 20% of Senate District 4's voter turnout and considered a heavy Republican area for the vote in the city of Houston, there are a lot of Francis O'Rourke yard signs out. A lot of them. And so I'm told he has 1.3 million yard signs out in Texas. Consultants and experts say those don't matter. And yeah, there are. And consultants say there are a lot of those signs that are in yards that may be on a corner or on a busy road, but those folks don't even vote. We'll find out, you know. Dr. Lorpson, you and I have talked about in recent years how many registered voters are in Montgomery County, but even in Obama-Romney, a lot of those voters didn't turn out. And so we wondered, who are those folks, you know? And I think in the Trump-Clinton election, we found out who some of them were, and we even found out who a lot of folks were that weren't registered voters just a few short years ago. In Jefferson County that I represent, as I have a lot of Montgomery County, Kingwood, Opal, and Spring, around the east side of Houston, all the way to Galveston County and Bolivar, and then my district goes to the Louisiana border from there, all the way down I-10. So in Jefferson County, Beaumont, Port Arthur, where I'll be tomorrow night, working on a county judge election there. It's interesting that Jefferson County had not voted Republican for president in 44 years until the president that we have now appeared on the ballot. And so they decided to break from unions and labor forces and organizations where they typically voted Democrat, to go for the guy that just said, you know what, I'm running as a Republican and I'm tired of all these people, and I'm going to clean up a mess. And so they broke ranks and voted for him. And now we have conservatives on the Supreme Court. We have the EPA on a complete overhaul. We have North Korea at the table, and the embassy in Israel now in Jerusalem. And I could keep going on and on and on. We have 22 states with the lowest unemployment ever recorded in the history of those states. We're in the largest economic boom in American history and the largest oil and gas production boom in American history. The lowest unemployment for African American workforce, Asian American workforce, and the Hispanic workforce in either generations or ever, depending on which category. So other than that, this administration hasn't done much, right? Right? I mean, and it just is, it's all about the facts. And so I think that there's always room for improvement, but I think that President Trump is the first to say that. You know, I certainly can improve, we all can. But those are the pressures that he places upon himself. Mike Pence is an incredibly good man. The Trump kids are amazing people, and that reflects so well on the parents. And many of you know Donald Trump Jr. was here in Conroe just a few nights ago. Incredibly good speaker, has a great command of the issues and where we need to take, you know, the next steps for the vision for the country that conservatives believe in. Uses the same hand gestures and body language that his dad does, but I would say he's even a better speaker, you know. And so it was nice to see the Trumps and the Cruzes working together. And you see a lot of noise on Facebook about how much hypocrisy is involved in that, and can you believe that, and on and on. And just a few, you know, short years ago, they were at each other's throats and on and on. Can you just hate politics even more? Or you could say, you know what, when you look at Scripture and you remind yourself of how you were raised by your grandparents to find a little civility when you lose your cool, and come back to the table when you know two leaders are able to help each other and the nation, then, you know, maybe that's what happens after the equal sign. And it's not a lot of hateful noise.
Amen.
So on that end, isn't it how you just decide yourself what the decision's going to be, you know? And then, you know, you can promote that any way you want, in a positive light or a negative, and live by that creed. I'll just leave it at that. But to sleep good at night and to make advancements and to pull others into the fold, which is what we have to do in growing the Republican Party. Many in the Democratic Party and liberals feel, because of the growth of the Hispanic population in Texas, that conservatives are lost. That Democrats will take the state and another Republican in the White House will not be possible. That Texas is the bell cow. It is the prize. And that's why the Francis O'Rourke money is coming our direction, right? But Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott in 2014 carried Bexar County. And we were never more diverse as a state and population, and never more conservative. How is that possible? It's possible because the Latino community and Hispanics in Texas share our values. That's why it's possible. And bridging those two things together for those that are law-abiding, hard-working, pro-life, pro-business, pro-family, pro-personal responsibility, pro-Texas individuals, that's a great combination. And is that just a bunch of rhetoric and just a hope for another unicorn to show up? I don't think so, because a seat that was not Republican in Bexar County, a Texas Senate seat that was just vacated due to shenanigans by the Democratic incumbent, was just a heated race between Pete Flores, the Hispanic Republican, and Pete Gallego, the Hispanic Democrat, both well-qualified, well-funded candidates. And the Hispanic Republican, Pete Flores, won the Bexar County to Eagle Pass seat. Is that right, guys? Yeah. Eagle Pass is the other side of that district.
Yes, sir. Eagle Pass through Maverick County all the way to Alpine.
That's a big district. But from 2014, when Abbott and Patrick carried the Republican vote in Bexar, to 2018 in a special election for the Texas Senate, electing the first Hispanic Republican state Texas senator ever in 138 years, I think is the count. In the midterm elections, where everybody's upset with President Trump for not doing a good job, and the blue wave is coming. So I'm not saying rest on our laurels. I'm saying put it in fifth gear and punch the gas.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we are on to something. And our message is good. Our candidates are good. We have right on our side because we are the pro-Constitution party. And those that trample on that document in Washington, D.C. every day, they're losing. They're losing. They have the media on their side in many respects, not always, but they're losing. And are you tired of winning? Absolutely not. Yes.
I wanted to say, conservatives have purpose. We're on, like you say, on the right side. Well, yes, but we are. And the problem, liberals don't seem to have much in an ethical stand.
Their own self and no show.
They don't, how do I say this? They don't seem to have real purpose.
Well, as conservatives and Republicans, we see every day that we feel they compromise what we all consider to be shared values for Texas and for families and for the next generation. If they're willing to compromise that, or they don't even believe in it to start with, then they're lost.
Maybe that is why so many of them haven't been coming to vote, because they don't really know what they believe.
Maybe so. Maybe so. It's a good point. So I think that our growth and outreach to bring others into the Republican Party and to understand what we believe in. I think there are still so many voters that don't necessarily understand the difference between the two parties. I get a lot of information on just human psychology and human behavior off of social media, just in seeing the conversations that are exchanged. But it's surprising to me how many people say that the down ballot races don't matter, Republican or Democrat. County judge or state district judge or county treasurer. It's just about, can you count? Or it's just about, are you maybe a fiscal conservative?
Why do they think it doesn't matter?
But I don't know. I don't know, because if that were the case and it didn't matter, then they could run in the primary.
Yes.
If they believed in what we believe in. But there is some key differences between the schools of thought. Yes, a county judge doesn't make the same decisions as a state legislator, but a person that makes decisions to follow that brand, that's telling. And to some, it may be not. It may say nothing at all, and to others, it may scream something loud and proud that we don't necessarily believe in or align with. So we have to make those decisions, and so do they. And every candidate that offers themselves for for public service. They need to explain exactly who they are to their core, and you know, how they make decisions and what those decisions will be. So
I've heard,
yeah.
Brendan, that the Democratic Party sees the down ballot as the way to get people in and get known and move up through the chains. It's actually a strategy for them.
And to build from there, and I think that's the case, and I think that was probably the effort on the Woodlands Town. Continue to talk about our message and our beliefs and our values, and from there, you know, the voters will decide. It's my opinion. I think the voters are very smart, and many miss that. I think sometimes consultants out of Austin miss that, and you can tell on some of the dumbed down nature of the television commercials, exactly that. You know, people just turn the channel because it's a waste of time, you know. So, but from there, we have a lot of hard work ahead of us. So Harvey was not what we were expecting when we left the legislative session last time around. We passed a $200 billion budget that we balanced. That budget was 1.9% expanded from the previous 2-year budget. So on $200 billion, we grew that budget below growth and inflation. And that is, appreciate that. That is a standard that we should all expect. Local government can do that. School districts can do it. Counties, cities, any level of government can do that. But we have to continue to decide and make decisions on priorities. So what we will face going into the next session, as we just crafted a budget with oil historically, you know, on a lower trend, not on a 1.5 or 2-year bounce, but on a 5 to 8 year decline, we had to decide, you know, what we would spend on Medicaid, what we would spend on health care, what we would put into public schools, which was $2.65 billion additional dollars for new growth and enrollment. Many don't hear that reported through the Chronicle. And that we balanced the budget, keeping taxes low. We kept the franchise tax cut by almost 50%, which we had done the last session, and funded higher education, put $800 million into additional border security even with that balanced budget, and we maintained, at that time, almost $10 billion in our state's rainy day fund, which S&P and Moody's tells us to keep around $6 to $7 billion on hand for a crisis to protect our Texas credit rating. And we've all seen the federal level dinged twice because they ignored that. And debt didn't matter and spending didn't matter. So we do take that serious. We do listen to you when your voice says fiscal responsibility matters. And on top of all that, we passed another voter ID bill. We ended sanctuary cities. We strengthened the Second Amendment. And we kept doing what Texans deserve and what Texans expect, along with massive annexation reform. There was a 25 to 30 year sea change in annexation policies where communities will have to have the right to vote before they're taken in to taxation without representation. And many thought the special session was a waste of money, right? Because the property tax reform bill, the conservative Senate passed over 5 times, got killed in the House that many times. So we went into a special session. I requested, along with a few others, the governor call that special, and that bill got killed again. So was that special session a waste of money? Well, I can say no for 2 big reasons. We passed a pro-life bill that I carried that we had attempted to pass in the state of Texas for 12 years and had not passed it yet. Simply requires if you have an insurance policy and you want a coverage for abortion, you get a separate rider for that coverage so that everyone in the general pool that doesn't want to pay or share in that cost doesn't have to. It took us 12 years to pass that in Texas. This special session we got that passed and it received national acclaim. And then annexation reform was the other major bill, which I don't know about all of you, but if thousands and thousands and thousands of rooftops can avoid a city tax by voting no, To me, folks, that is property tax reform.
Absolutely.
That is saving major dollars on your tax bill, 60% or 60 cents per ad valorem, or however you want to look at it, if you say no. But before that bill was passed, you didn't have the right to. It was taxation without representation, and maybe we'll do a good job coming to get your trash. So, yeah. Now, I want to be fair. There are neighborhoods in and around the city of Conroe that have been taken, let's say Teeswood, for example, where they didn't want to be taken at first, but they decided to, and those folks are pleased. April Sound, we can all interview those folks, and they can say the same. The gate stayed up. So, depending on how the debt for that community is paid off, depending on what the tax rate is and the services are, I don't have a beef with that. All I have a beef with is being taken without having a say.
That's right.
That's the issue, and we were able to accomplish that. So going into next session, oil revenue is back up. Comptroller Hager, and I'll conclude with this, says we have $2.7 billion more in revenue than we were expecting, because we have to guess 2 years ahead to understand what our revenue versus expenses will be. We're behind on Medicaid by about $1 billion. That population continues to grow on, in my opinion, an unsustainable path, even though we said no to Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. I'm talking about the current population. I don't know what the numbers would have even been if we would have said yes to Obamacare, but we blocked that. The current population is that we're $1 billion short on that, and our match with the federal government on Harvey will be 3 to 4, probably out of the rainy day fund, because again, our revenues are lean. So again, when conservatives are criticized when we protect the rainy day fund as we're hoarding cash. But when there is a crisis like a Harvey, a Katrina, or a Rita, and a $4 billion number is expected to just be taken, swept out of that account, so that federal money can be deployed and we can meet our matching requirements, that's tremendous. And that's why we, as conservatives, make sure that we're prepared for a rough day, and that we do, when we do have cash, that we're frugal, and we continue to ask state agencies to cut by 3 or 4%, and we grow that budget by a very lean amount on your behalf. So with that, I want to take time for a few more questions, but again, it's great to be with you. January session is upon us. I see many faces here that come over to the Capitol. Please keep doing so. That gives me a lot of backup, and I'm proud to show you off. And sometimes when I'm hoarse or can't talk anymore, I need your voice. So, but just having you there is wonderful, especially for Montgomery County Day. So with that, it's a privilege to represent you, and thank you so much for the time. Questions, Bryce?
Let me ask you a question about the two elephants in the room around the issues of property tax.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be fighting the battle again, but there are two issues here that bother me dramatically.
Sure.
If there are no, if you put a cap on property tax, but you do nothing about the appraisal issue, and you do nothing to cap the school taxes, then the average individual paying property tax, and I'm speaking specifically of my two sisters, they're in their 60s right now, in a 50-year-old home, their taxes are not exorbitant. They have an acre and a half of land, around $2,000 a year, but roughly 500 of that goes to the county, the rest of it goes to school.
Absolutely.
And I'm sitting there going, you've got to be kidding me.
No, 2/3 of the bill is going to school.
That's right. So from a business standpoint, I'm sitting looking at something that's failing constantly, demanding more money, demanding more money, demanding more money, and say, we'll fix it, we'll fix it, we'll fix it, we'll fix it, and there's never a fix. And I'm watching people being pushed out of their homes because they can't afford property tax. It's a direct result of a failing system. I know you can't solve that overnight, I don't expect you to, but those two things involved in that three-legged stool bother me.
No,
it's not over here those addressed.
Those are great points. I hope all of you could hear Bryce and the points he was making, but that's not just the elephant in the room. I mean, that is the overriding set of issues to manage and balance, and to get the votes to change and really reform the system. So we're not having a state income tax.
Right.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Absolutely. And that bill is filed either every session or every other session, and there's a lot of anti-business interest even in Austin. So the property tax system falls on suburban counties to a heavy degree, just like ours.
Yes.
And some of us moved here a few months ago, some of us have lived here a while, but we're all seeing the compounded nature of the growth, and these issues are colliding with taxes, with roads, with water. It's like a law school bar exam question where cities, farm producers, industry, developers, environmentalists, on and on, all collide in the suburbs, and so does tax policy.
Yes.
So the Chronicle always reported, how are you working on tax reform without working on redoing school finance formulas? The answer was, we weren't.
That's right.
But we couldn't get the Chronicle to report on our efforts to reform school funding. And we established a school finance commission, which there's only been an overhaul of school funding formulas 2 times in 84 years. And one was No Pass, No Play, Ross Perot in the 80s. And many of us remember that. But there hasn't been a whole lot of significant sea change in those categories. So, appraisal cap, I carry it every session. We need 2/3 of the legislature to vote for it. Republicans in parts of Texas don't support it.
They don't understand it, or they would.
Correct. And they're protecting something, because
And that bothers
if
me.
you don't live on I-35, you don't live on I-45, you don't live on I-59,
Yes.
which a lot of people don't,
Correct.
those rural Republican areas, they, and their cities and counties, don't feel that they are gaining in tax base. Many of them are status quo, many of them are digressing, going backwards. And so it's interesting when we veer from our principles, right? Because there should be nothing scary about an appraisal cap. We have one now. So if we go from 10% down to the bills I filed, either 3 or 5, and just see how it works. If there's a crisis, the governor can call us in on a 30-day session, and we can raise that back up if we need to. Because we don't have the two-thirds voting threshold, even among Republicans, we filed a property tax, not relief bill, because that sounds like you're getting money back.
Right.
It's called reform because it changes the system. It caps what local government can spend, and if it's above 4%, which is where our bill was, any money above that, local government can spend it, but they got to ask you to go to the polls to vote to say yes, or they can lower the tax rate to match it. They say, in many respects, the city of Austin might say, we're going to have to fire all the policemen and firefighters if you pass that. The answer to that is never, because you have your tax rate.
That's right.
And you as councilmen can raise your tax rate if you need more revenue, but just go sell it.
Yeah.
Right now, many of you say you haven't raised the tax rate in 20-something years because the appraisals are going through the roof. And that's new money coming in that if you're getting as a city 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% new revenue, you're spending all of it and bonding all your capital improvements separate from that money.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for property taxpayers.
No.
And they're asking the legislature to do what? Interfere with local control.
I don't have a better solution. Under the circumstances, it's so far out of control.
Yeah, well, the better solution is the appraisal cap.
I agree.
We'll keep after it. Bettencourt and I and a few others that are pushing this legislation. We'll do our best.
I assume you have the same basic issue with the school taxes as well. It gets more than rural.
Yes. Now, I'm glad you brought that up. The schools are on a rollback already.
Right.
They're at 8%.
Yes.
So we're basically under our tax reform bill saying cities and counties, you have to have a similar mechanism that schools already have.
Right.
Our public schools here are very good. Our private schools here are very good. But people are very frustrated with the amount of money that are going into either local spending, dollars that aren't going into the classroom.
Right.
And there's some studies that show that past that 38, 39, 40% mark, that money is going elsewhere. And so we just need to have a really robust conversation. If it needs to go elsewhere, what is that going to?
Well, it didn't do that when you and I were in school.
Right.
It was an entirely different setup.
Right.
And those, but we had lots of teachers that we counted on, and they
Now-
were golden to us.
Now, we always hear it's our Austin mandates on the school districts that are causing them to spend that much money. I can tell you folks, Austin's public school funding is going like this, but local public school funding is going like this.
Yes.
We can't keep up with that, so it doesn't match 50-50. When oil is down, we may be down in the 30s. When oil is up, we may be up in the mid-40s. It fluctuates over time, but we can't keep up with it because you can't and shouldn't have to be expected to.
I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but I want to ask you one more important thing, because I deal with school boards all the time with people getting elected to school boards. One of the complaints I hear from school boards is they have no real authority. There's an hourglass structure. You have the school board going down, the superintendent going down to the schools. You can't get past the superintendent to fix anything. You have to take the superintendent's word for what is going down below, and so the school board becomes virtually ineffective. You may have wonderful, fantastic, great conservative individuals in there, but they can have no direct effect on what's really being done because of the current structure. They tell me that structure is because of our legislature, that that's how they set it up. Is that or is that not so?
Well, the power of elected positions in representing the people is having a voice directly to the people. And so I would say to that, that it's not as much, I mean, there may be reform and changes that need to happen, and I'm all ears on that and always an open door. But if our school board members, which we have incredible, talented school board members across Montgomery County, but if they speak out on issues they feel need to change, they feel like they need more of a voice, press conferences, addressing the public, town halls, they're elected officials. And so if you've seen school board members hold a town hall lately, maybe I've missed it. But there are ways to do that, and it's, you know what, it's not going to Austin, it's going to the people you represent and saying, I need your help.
That's right.
And I think that they would create, a listening audience pretty fast if they need those changes. Austin money, local money, federal money, whose money is that?
Mine.
Exactly. So when we hear Austin needs to do more, we have to balance all that out and work together and make it make sense, but the warring back and forth between the entities or between the levels is counterproductive for the kids that are in school.
Yes.
We have excellent public schools. We sometimes need reform on our policies and pilot programs and things that we look at to be innovative or competitive. But by and large, we're working together, and what you read in the media and different things as it's espoused is not always accurate. I mean, I know I can pick up the phone and call superintendents, teachers, school board members and get the straight talk, and when they're frustrated, they can do the same. On the mandates from Austin, unfunded mandates to schools, we filed a bill this last session of the Senate. I'll close with this. It did away with all unfunded mandates for public schools. The Texas Association of School Board organization came into the committee room and testified against it. Never see that in the paper.
No.
So when these types of things happen and there's a miscommunication on stakeholders and rhetoric, I think it's counterproductive. I mean, these are better. It's better to use positive rhetoric and bring these different levels of government and these different elected officials and superintendents and administrators together and just say, we got to work this out, and we will. And I feel my relationship with the public school educators and faculty here is great, but that's because we can have the tough conversations. Yes?
If we have such great public schools, why do they have to go to remedial classes before they can go to college nowadays?
Well, I would say on that end that, again,
we never did.
We always need we always need improvement, but Bryce brought up the elephant in the room. We need parents working with kids at the kitchen table on homework at night.
Bingo.
And there's a lot of situations where we don't. So we can't always blame the sticks and bricks and the government. We can't blame the government. Schools are government, right? we can't always blame that. We have to be able to make sure that everybody is at the table helping kids, and that starts at home in many respects. So if you don't, do you feel in every single category that every kid has the help they need at home?
No, absolutely not.
But y'all are both shaking your head no.
Well,
So it's either one or the other. You can't have it both ways.
The issue, though, is it's even more complex than that.
It's very complex.
That's the whole problem.
But I'm just saying
But what's
that
being taught is no longer
it's
useful.
not just criticism to every single public school as a blanket.
But what's being taught is no longer useful to providing.
That's not what y'all said. The curriculum is a whole different subject.
Yes.
So, for instance, the State Board of Education and what goes into our textbooks is a fight every single
Yes, there is.
And it's a
time
farce.
those are about to be published. So we could have a whole nother talk on that. I don't want to hold everybody up on it, but I understand your point. Yes.
Okay, this will really be an elephant in the room.
Yeah. I'm all for elephants in the room. We're all Republicans, right?
Back there.
If Texas got rid of the sanctuary cities,
Yeah.
we are adjacent to one where we live in Splendora. It's a boom town. It is definitely a sanctuary city. It's not being discussed in the press, but unfortunately, even in our own backyard, in our city, Splendora, we have a tent city on a street that is adjacent to us. And we are getting more and more concerned about safety and what is happening around us. Where do we, what do we do?
You know, from state, I mean, as a legislator, I work on legislation and bills and changing policy, and so that was a historic feat, but how it works on the ground, I mean, we're still working through that. And ending sanctuary cities is not going to happen overnight. But what that bill does is it simply says local law enforcement is going to cooperate with federal law enforcement. And you'd think that's just common sense. So if ICE has a hold on a particular individual, and that individual is flagged as a bad guy, and then that same individual is stopped by local police for speeding, there's a decision made if in that system, that law enforcement system, that ICE red flag shows up, to let that person go or hold them until federal authorities can come and evaluate the situation. And so ending sanctuary cities simply just make sure that at the top of the law enforcement food chain locally, that there can't be a directive to all officers to not cooperate with ICE. That's what that bill does.
Are you talking about inside or outside the city limits?
This is outside the city limits,
Okay.
but it's still within the county.
Okay, well, the city has passed a lot of regulations recently. They were a small city, and they've always been.
I'll talk to you later.
Okay, but they've passed a lot of regulations to help change the building codes and other things, which drives a lot of that out of the city limits. I don't. No, it drives it out of it because you can't bring in these old mobile homes that are tore up anymore, and just set it up as a flop house for illegals.
If you have development concerns and you have areas with absolutely zero deed restrictions and counties don't have much enforcement authority on development at all, that's a totally different point to make than what you and I are talking about as a sanctuary city for criminals. So are there bad actors in every community? Yes, and in a community with tents and in River Oaks. But we have to, you and I can work together on if it's truly a sanctuary city and what those policies are. We can shed some light on it.
We don't live in the city. Our city is Splendora, but we are outside the city limits. We're not actually in the city proper.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about sanctuary city policies, so municipal policies inside of the city. So we can talk about it afterwards. But yeah, I'll be happy to visit with you on it. Okay, any other questions? I know I've kept you long enough, but thank you so much for the time, the privilege to visit with you tonight.
Thank Senator Creighton for being here. One good thing about the attendance tonight is you actually get to talk to him afterwards.
Absolutely.
Normally in a meeting like this, he gets bombarded and it's hard to get access, so that's a good thing. If you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. I know some of you are running for office. I personally believe it's better to join an organization before you run for office. And when you do run, to stay in an organization, so if you have to rerun, they'll remember you. So my point is that we are growing. We grew quite fast, and we will continue to grow. John Sellers is actually running the chambers. I put out, he's our director of programming. He's assured me that we're going to have some really good programs next year, and it'll be pertinent to what's going on in Montgomery County. And it's like I said, for night meetings, we are literally one of the few alternatives short of a tea party. So we will give you guys an alternative for learning what's going on, including Senator Creighton. We had Keogh in last month. We actually had the director of the water board